Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
We are continuing our series on abrogation, and this time we're going to look at the practical considerations and practical problems with the application of abrogation. So, Dr. Shabir, I think one practical application is that the scholars seem to not be in general agreement about which verses are abrogated and which aren't.
Yes, and one can easily see this from consulting the commentaries on the Quran. And one reason for this lack of agreement can be understood because of the vagueness with regards to the occasion of revelation of specific verses. Now, just to give more context to this, the understanding of Muslims is that the Quran has been revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, over a period of 23 years. So that is the broader context of the entire Quran. But which verse was revealed in which year, or even on which specific date, this is very vague. And sometimes you might find that the occasion of revelation might be stated in the classical commentaries on the Quran, but 2 or 3 different occasions might be mentioned for the same verse, leading sometimes to the scholars not wanting to reject any of these narratives, to say they must all be correct, and therefore the verse must have been revealed on more than one occasion. So why would the verse be revealed on more than one occasion, you ask? And they would say, well, maybe as a reminder to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and to the community of the verse which was already once revealed. But that does not seem to be a convincing answer, because God wouldn't need to reveal it twice. If you think of the revelation process, revelation is like unveiling. It's like something was hidden. Now you remove the veil, we can see it now. Now, if we had seen it once, it's not an unveiling the second time, because it's already totally unveiled. It's not covered up again. But if people had forgotten, they just need to be reminded. It's not a new revelation given to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So what we must conclude is that some of these reports about the verse being revealed on this occasion or that occasion are mistaken. And that's fine, because they were related by human beings. They were good people, companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And sometimes later generations, they're saying, this verse was revealed on such and such an occasion with respect to such and such a person. But their memories could have gotten mixed up. They mixed up one person for another, one occasion for another, and they reported these things. But the bottom line from this is that we have these reports, and we cannot agree on which ones are to be given preference in a certain with regards to a certain verse.
And you talked about the occasions of revelation, but also the order of revelation is not always clear, right?
Yes, and the two are tied, because if we know that there are 2 verses on a certain question, and we want to know which verse are we to give preference to, if we're going with this theory of abrogation where one verse cancels the other, how do we know which one cancels the other? So we go to the occasions of revelation, because we want to know which is the last of the 2. Because the last of the 2, according to the theory, would reflect God's final word on the issue. But we cannot decide which is the last of the 2, because the occasions of revelation, the narratives that tell us that this was revealed on one occasion, this was revealed on a subsequent occasion, those narratives are not dependable. So we cannot know in the end which one is which. So if you have 2 verses A and B, scholars who agree on the theory of abrogation on the whole would be split. Some of them would say it's the A verse that abrogates the B verse. And some others will say, no, it's the B verse that abrogates the A verse, so that the final word is with the B verse. And what we would say in response, not going by that theory of abrogation, is that we would say that both apply. A and B both apply. But somehow they are to be interpreted in the light of each other. Maybe one of them is stating something in a general way, the other one is stating it in a more precise way. There maybe one is giving an exception to a general rule, which is stated in the other, and so on. So they have to be interpreted in the light of each other, but it's not that one of them supersedes or cancels the other, as has been described in the classical theory of abrogation that we explained in detail in the previous
Dr.
episode.
Shabir, can you give me an example so I can understand this a little bit better about the practical problems of abrogation?
Well, one of the practical problems is with the idea that the adulterer and adulteress should be stoned. So this comes as a result of reading verses in the Quran and saying that one cancels the other. The final verse they said about this is Surah 24, verse number 2. This gives the final ruling about adultery in the Quran. And there we go, and we see that the ruling is that the adulterer and adulteress should be flogged 100 lashes each. So we ask, well, where is it mentioned stoning? And then we get the reply, well, no, you see, the stoning is not mentioned here in the Quran as we have it now, but it was in another verse of the Quran, which was not compiled into the Quran, not because anybody made a mistake and left it out, but because divine wisdom dictated that it should not be in the final copy of the Quran that we have. But nonetheless, it was a verse that was revealed and was recited by Muslims within the lifetime of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and duly applied, where it said that the sheikh and sheikha, which is a different wording because this means old man and old woman, whereas the classical ruling says it's not necessarily old man and old woman, it's any married person who commits adultery, whether male or female. Nonetheless, this is the best that the theory can provide in its support to say that there was a verse like this that spoke about the old man and old woman. If they commit adultery, then you are to stone them, absolutely. So now they're saying that the stoning is pertaining to that verse, or comes out of that verse, which is no longer in the Quran.
So the verse is no longer in the Quran, but the ruling still applies.
But the ruling still applies according to them. So this gives rise to a lot of conceptual and practical problems. But now, coming back and tying this discussion in with our discussion about the occasion of revelation, when we come to the verse in Surah 24, verse number 2, which speaks about the 100 lashes for the adulterer, whether male or female, and it doesn't distinguish between married or unmarried. Now, some of the commentators, you see, when we read a classical commentary on the Quran, the classical commentary itself is citing earlier commentators on the Quran who did not necessarily write a book, but their commentaries are known and passed on by oral tradition, and they're all collected in volumes such as those of At-Tabari. So At-Tabari will relate, okay, such and such a person who was a great commentator on the Quran, he said this, and some other one said this, and so on. Some of these commentators, we will find, are saying that they're not sure if the 24th chapter of the Quran, speaking about lashing, was revealed prior to, or let me put it the other way around. So we have the verse of the Quran saying lashing, and we have a hadith saying that the Prophet, peace be upon him, applied stoning. So the commentators are saying, we don't know if the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was stoning people prior to this verse being revealed or after this verse came to be revealed. If he was doing it prior to the verse being revealed, that does not tell us what the last ruling is, because the last ruling could very well be what this verse says, which is lashing instead of stoning. But if the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, continued to stone after this verse has been revealed, well, then that would show what the last Islamic ruling is. It comes from the Prophet, not from this Quranic verse, but that would be the last thing. So that means that they do not know precisely when this verse was revealed and in relation to the actions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So this is a discrepancy between the dating of the verse and the dating of the Prophet's action. But you have discrepancies like this between the dating of one verse with relation to another as well, because they're all very vague. The reports are not very dependable.
They're not coming from the Prophet himself, right?
Not coming from the Prophet himself. They're reported by companions and sometimes later generations, and the reports contradict each other. So practically, you will not know how to apply the verses given this theory of abrogation, because you don't know whether it's A that champions B or trumps B, or whether it is B that trumps A. But if we were to put aside that theory of abrogation and we look at the Quran holistically, we would say that the Quran explains itself. Parts of the Quran explains another part. Parts of the Quran explain another part. And we would interpret the verses in the light of each other. We might say that one gives a general rule, the other one gives an exception, the other one gives more particulars, and if one is vague, the other one clarifies it more, and they're to be interpreted in the light of each other, not that one is to be put down so that the other one supersedes the one that is put down.
Thank you for explaining that, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.
We're going to explore this topic again and continue this series, but next time we will look at what modern academics have said about abrogation.
Sure.
If you enjoyed this video, click like and subscribe. And please donate to support our work at QuranSpeaks.com.